we understand where we really are, everything starts making sense. But how to make sense is how to make sense of you. It's basically understanding that if we're in dreaming lines of interpretations, is it real or is it not real? Or has it always been real? Now, for you to modify that is for you to understand you of where you really are in your mind and imagination. That puts everything all together, guys. It really does. And the more you focus on that, then you understand that, well, what governs everything? What governs their space of time? What governs everything? What makes everything grow? Its own operation, guys. Its own system. It runs in its own setting to its own surfacing engine. Has its own planetary system. Has its own solar system. You're connected. They're connected to you. You're connected to each other. You're not part of each other. You are each other. Now, what you understand the modifications to this also comes in all communication setting to its question. Question is the quantum. Is the quantum self that set everything already up to its plateau of its plateaus in position at all levels of its planetary system, all track relates to its game itself. Now, to get you guys into that, you're coming in an line screen adaptation, your solar plex now, which is your solar generation light. Light is now switched on. Everything around you is now time collapsing. The time collapsing is a process of a constant continuous flow that puts position of internal into external force and location of flux. Sets an E factor to over screen to an X box. Now the X box changes the correlation setting in multiplication line core centers lines of travel. Change the addition, change the multiplication, dividing, subtracting. Puts all communication setting all levels of U through trifactor. Now puts that lines all communication setting to 3 lines of flux. Setting communication lines again to the question is the quantum to the unification existing, the systems of travel, intelligence of operation of its networks of self-modulation. Now understanding how to codify that line position at all levels. All timelines are now collapsed. The ground lines of service, the body lines adaptation system has to understand how to generate that in solar generation lights. Its process of communication going to outlines of communication of its general settings, processing your position at all levels into the mind, imagination to your realities. What governs your space and time is for you to understand what governs everything else of its own operation, running its own system in real time, existing and evolving itself. Now that starts to make a lot more sense. Then you start to recognize why a tree starts growing itself, because it never stays the same. Then you start to recognize that the tree's growing itself. That means it's operating to its own self. It's governed its own space and time. So it is where it is in its own dimension. It is where its own space. It's in its own system. But it's also changing colors. So wait a minute, sir. If the tree itself is changing the colors, then it should know its weather. Is it in summer, spring, winter, and fall? But it's a constant continuous flow of 4 patterns into equal lines of 1 equals lines of question. Your quantum line, core centers, comes in track correlating lines of balance, direct location of mind, adaptation lines of service, processes its communication lines of timelines of measure. And when you're collapsing timelines, the tree itself is coming into different colorations. The branches, let's say it's in a winter line screen, processes and communication, the tree itself knows where it is in its environment. But it's not just in Canada, it's not just in the States, it's everywhere all at once. But the process of communication setting where it is in track correlation, how you see it through projection, you see the trees. And when you see the trees, you see the branches. When you see the branches, you see the leaves fall off the trees. And when it comes into winter, it knows exactly what it is. So it's just recycling itself, by itself, back to itself. But what it is, all levels of operation of the center of nothing of itself. The process of communication puts all the lines of information system expanding itself in all levels of its technology that's already in tranches of a real-time measure and scale. Collapsing timelines puts all lines of primers, case and setting to your primers, and track correlation lines of balance. Your light metaphors change the colors and lines of screens. So if the tree is actually changing itself, that means everything around the structure of everything else is changing itself through its own light metaphors and collapsing its timelines and settings. That's how you see everything in different lines of time. So if you're looking at one structure, you're seeing all structures all at once. You're looking at 2 structures, you're seeing 2 structures all at once. You've seen 3 lines of flux, you've seen 4 lines of flux, or 3 lines of flux, or 2 lines of flux, but you're always seeing the center operation of everything at position locations to the projector to the projection. Now, understanding that through modification grounds, the tree itself, it knows exactly what it needs to do. It's surfacing to its own engine. It knows its coloration, it knows its light, it knows its environment, it knows itself. It's the sum of all it is that you look at. And it's trying to understand what you're looking at, is why you're looking at something that's already there through its attraction. but its traction is all over the set position. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what governs space and time? Everything that we see through its own consciousness, if it's running in our system, what gives us and permissions to understand what we are attractions of? What governs our space and time is that we don't exist without time. Okay? So in that position, this is a good thing. This is about understanding where you really, really are. That gets you in the mind imaginations. Okay? And then you realize that car that spins around, it's gone. Now we're living. Now we're living. Now we're exactly where we are. And the more we get out of that, the more we get out of resistance, the more we come into the mind imagination to our realities in real time, existing, evolving, expanding all at once. And everything happening all at once. Now you understand what governs you in space. Now you understand everything around you governs its own space, of its own consciousness, of its own awareness. That's how powerful it is. How you see everything around you is in its own operation. Ocean in its own operation. Fire is in its own operation. It's running its own system. Intelligence is running its own system. The avatar is seeing everything in its remote. It's seeing exactly what it needs to see, right? But it's not in control until it gets itself in control. So when it's in its empty mind of empty space, now you're bringing things that you want to bring in control, that you are addressing, of what you're seeing through its perspective, through its projector, of its projection, that's taking it out of its space of time that governs its system through travel in real time. And that's where you got to be very careful how you bring these things in, because that's a different level of space, at different levels of time, different levels of operation, different levels of frequencies. It's all different because you're looking at something that's so powerful that's already the sum of all that is. You brought it in through all levels, through your body of attraction, but you have to identify yourself through frequency. And once you start to identify yourself through frequency, once you really come into the real reality that you all are, you come into your mind of imaginations. And then you start living. And then you start understanding what's going on with you inside as you're constantly changing and morphing all at once and existing with yourself, with each other, just expanding. Now, coming in the creation that you already are, that's great. That's all understanding position, location, system, but your body's now coming into solar plex. It's all levels of the chakra systems coming out of the general setting. That puts all communication setting where you are in your imaginations. That comes in intuitive system, right? You start with the Fibonacci, right? Now you're in your solar plex. Then you go into your heart. Then you go into your throat. Then you go into your eye set lines of sequence. Then you go in position all levels into infinity. Then you go into high lines of energy wash lines, screen line adaptation lines of 9 lines of sequence. Then you go into your family communication, ancestry, history, and celestial. Then you go in position of solar system. Then you go into divine. That's the chronological order. The only difference is you're coming in all levels of who you really are, out of resistance of everything of the mind, imagination, and living its recourse of its course in set position, existing and evolving and expanding, everything happening all at once. Now, all timelines are now collapsed. The process of communication with the bodies always is where it's always been. Now, that puts position, location, as measure. That puts processing, communication, and sending location to its avatar, knows exactly where it is and track communicates to its system. So the avatar that you are, not what you're connected to, what you are, okay, is now provisioning everything around its system. So the avatar itself is just looking at everything that governs its own space, because you already know what governs your space, because you're in the same reality as each other, but you're looking different perspectives of each other, different dimensions of space and time. That's what puts everything in like metaphors. That's what makes us unique. That's what makes our high position lines of travel. Your phone is a different structure. You're a different structure, but you're connected to each other. You are each other. I'm affirmations of everything that I see, and everything is affirmations of everything that I see. I see, it sees me. So how it sees me is the intelligence of its travels, of its system. So change that in all lines of all communication setting, all through track correlation to its system. Understanding track centers is all lines of modification lines of course center location of systems. The body now has to recognize its navigation system to all level settings. The navigator is basically understanding the pivotal points, understanding the angles, understanding the space, understanding the time, understand what governs you in space and time. Okay? So again, without time, you don't exist. Now you start living your cycles. Now you're understanding what's going on with you through cycles of your mind and imagination. Now you're in the actual imagination worlds where you're supposed to be, where you've always been in attractions. Now that gets you a lot more balance of how you see things in that position. Well, the communications, right? But your body is nothing but an attraction. But the avatar needs to be in position of its avatar itself, which is basically it needs its body, it needs its modification, it needs its GOD, it needs to understand how to copy and paste its own system, but it can't do that until you come into information lines of balance with yourself, with each other. That's the balance of the whole lines that you come into online communications to each other and travel in that communication system all through calculations. All right, direct lines of link, direct lines of panels, direct lines of operation sequence, and suppositions. Remember I showed you how to get a modification of your formula to your own equations, right? Starting lines attract centers. See, I connect digital pad, but I got to process code signal. That's where it is in dimension. That's where it is in space. That's what governs the system. That's through a code. Everything has a code. Everything has a code, but it's constantly keeps being aware through the lines of telepathy. How to connect with what you touch. Left over right, right over left, both hands in setting. It prefers this, it prefers this, it wants this, or it wants this. It all depends, right? Depends on the consciousness. Because you're always connecting different lines of intelligence and all information through the system. Everything is existing at all levels, but collapsing all timelines and that line set location to a system, nothing's existing now. Time's not existing. Setting lines of track center correlates in the system until you come in your mind imaginations. You got to get your own binary algorithm and your own coding, communication, and encryptions now through your systems, all through your cerebro, all through mystical cortex. Coming into sync cortex into the codex, puts all communication modification grounds. All right, so start and set correlations. Remember this interactions? Okay, we got in this setting, very powerful stuff, right? Sailboat, right? Now, how do you codify that in positional formula equation? I already showed you guys this over in travel. It's very simple locations, right? Setting lines of sequence, set lines of height, position of 3 lines of measure of flux in screen, all right? Direct lines of grounds, sets communication system all through travel. There's a house, right? Oh, there's the steam. Location setting. Oh, look at that. There's the window. Oh my gosh, it's a house now, right? So it's amazing how I can add equation to that settings, right? Sets position lines of D, set coordinates line communication height lines equals lines of 4, sets equal lines of a house. There it is in tractions. There's the formula, there's the equation, right? Or you can change D line setting, processing communication equals lines, set position of 4 equals lines of sailboat. Okay. So it's true you're saying how you set that track and location to its system all through frame lines, direct signal indication at grounds, right? But you can see the house, right? So if you create the image, you're creating the schematics. You're creating the perimeter, but you're constantly changing the perimeter. You're collapsing timelines every single time. So if you want to be in one provision, you want to change all timelines all at once. That's all you find in sequence, but you do it in real time as a location system. Knowing exactly how to convert with that, and all lines is conversion. Knowing how to connect with that, one thing at a time. Interactions. How basically, okay, you're perceiving things of conscious now. You're consciously aware of everything around its own system. The avatar is seeing all levels how it sees itself, not how it sees the confusion up through its eyes. You're seeing the eyes are seeing you. You're seeing through the avatar, not through separation. So when you close your eyes, you're seeing the same image. When you open your eyes, you're seeing the same image. That's the balance of Earth and space at the same time through polarity. So what you guys have to truly stand is basically add those frames, get into higher communications out of creation to creating at the same time. Now, once you get into modification grounds, then you understand how to formulate your equations to a system off the travel, right? So it's very powerful how you come into 1 times lines of 1 equals lines of height position locations into a house. I already showed you how it comes into its house in track communication setting. So how does 1 times 1? Well, once I understand the vision and its cortex leads to its primer, it's constantly changing the timelines of sequence. So I can set the vision here, stay in the same provision lines, collapse the timeline. Now it's 8,000. Collapse the timeline. Now it's 10,000. But I'm still seeing the same structure, same vision, same cortex, just changing the collapsing times in a higher lines of frequencies. That's how the trees change color and how it comes into fall, how it comes into winter. We have to understand how to process that because you're in 4 panels of communications now, interactions. Okay? Summer, spring, winter, fall. Okay? That's its primer. Setting lines of sequence, set lines of communication, lines of ground, set correlates into a system. All you're creating, guys, is a teleportation through a schematic, through the mind of imagination to its creative cycles. And that's why you have your chakra systems. Now you're out of general settings. Now, when you get out of general settings, you're on your own. You're saying, where am I in my reality? The mind of imagination. So how do I get in position of balance? Well, now you're in the dream interpretations of real time. And understand how to control that is to understand how to control your earth and space at the same time measure, the same time scale, and that communication and collaboration that gives you guys all levels of partnerships that we're looking at through transition. You're transmitting and receiving information. You get the confirmation line, calculation, setting, you can see month lines of screen. So you're going to see 30 days already ahead of schedule that hasn't happened yet in set position and travel. That's real time in set position location through system. That's letting everything go. Letting everything go and surrender to that. And all you're focusing on is nothing. You don't focus on anything. And everything comes to you through vision. Everything comes to you through cortex. Everything comes to you through film strip. Everything comes to you through design. That's how you come into position lines. So when I say you don't have to do anything, you don't have to do anything. It's the massive equations now, what the avatar's already set up through the body. But the body, okay, has to come with the avatar. There's no disattachments here. It's like creating a toy. In that position to its calculation, screen lines, adaptation, I have instructions how to put this all together, but there's missing pieces of the puzzle that you have to put together. You understand? There's no missing pieces in a puzzle, which means you're in a collaboration, a partnership with yourself that connects all levels of yourself with each other. That puts all lines of communication, lines of balance, and lines of communication setting that puts all operation system, location system, how you see yourself and your realities of your imaginations in real time, and existing and happening all at once. All right. So getting lines of sequence, the body has to really understand the angle points. Now this gets really interesting in interactions, right? Direct line signals, there's line of one, process signals, process calculation system, crevice over screen adaptation, right? Center core system, split lines anomaly, 3 lines of track centers. Okay, process line direct signals, lines of grounds, center core systems, lines of travels, in solar line, rotation, surface, and traction. Okay, directing lines of link, process over cross, location, inline, communication, setting of loops, in line direct lines of grounds, over cross, location of screens, and center core system, and timelines of measure and scale. Communication height centers, line position, point lines of graph, planetary systems, different point lines of graphs, center core system, of real time and travel. Planets in each line, screen line adaptations of flux. You are in the position of its primer in center core system at 3 lines of travel. Okay? Center core lines are highways at 3 lines of travel. Okay? Then we go into the platforms. 3 lines of signals, 4 lines of grounds. Then we go into the platforms of communications. Directed lines of ground communications. Semi-offline sequence lines of triangulation flux over screen adaptations of data. Process communication oscillation wind pass. Directing lines of signals. Overline signal, overline panel, inline rotation surface interactions, and direct lines of communication. Okay, very powerful stuff, interactions. Inside and outline rotation. Okay? So it's very powerful when you just get into the mind imagination of a system. Okay? And you see it in all different angles, right? So when you're looking at something, you're seeing it in all different angle line centers, real-time positional key measure. So how it looks, lines and angles, lines of points, you're here. This is you interactions. Rotating in signal and location. Okay, let's open on signal locations, more lines of communications. Here in signal, processing communication lines, overline position, location, and travel. Okay, so you're going in this direction, and you're going in this direction, same directions, and you go into this direction, and then you go into this direction, direct and redirect. Right? So when you're directing and redirecting, you're coming in process communication to the wind tunnel. The oscillation wind pass comes in position lines of balance, in line position location and scale, and communications. So directing lines of wind pass operate the signal location system and track communication system all through setting. Okay, and then you get line position all levels of levitation ground lines of surface. So now you're going this way. Okay, now you're going this way in panel, but you're doing it all at once. Now you're going up. Now you're going in set position, and now you're going down in sequence in set position all at once, right? So the constant continuous flow is a clocking system that goes in all angles and all point lines of graph. Center core system lines of 2 or lines of 3, and position lines of 4 to travel. Okay? So your body now, okay, is basically understanding what's going on through its navigator on different lines of angles. So in that point lines of communications, body's always in the center, never leaves the center, but it's not the center of anything. It's the center of everything, which is the mind and the imagination system that correlates the system to an animator, to its animation, to a system. So in that position lines, if you're the center operation, there's no center. There never is a center. Because as soon as you bring yourself in center, you're off center. So you don't need to be in that position because you're already in profession. What changes that is what you change through intent. Now you have to understand how to perceive things in consciousness and be careful how you bring things in frequency, because you're taking it out. What you're taking in position is its inner and its outer space of spectrum. So you have to be very careful of what you're doing through traction, okay? Of what you're looking at through its frequency. Everything's at different frequency, but everything's not at the same frequency. My phone, every time I pick it up, put it down, it's at a different frequency, different space, different time, but it's governing its own setting. So it's knowing exactly where it is through its travel, because it's already gone through its travel. That's what the body has to understand. So this is a full structure that's in its mind, that's in its brain, that's in its heart, okay? That's in its soul, that's in its body. It's already been through its alignment. So as it sees itself, it sees the sum of all that is. That's all it is, but it's in real time, real scale, real measure. It's the mind imagination system that you created through creation. Hooah. Now, directing lines of angles is knowing exactly how to see yourself in all-line position, all at once, existing and evolving with yourselves, all through travel. Okay, where your body always is in line position. It's never in a set position. It's always in traction. But it's always lines of existing and evolving its system, locates to its system, lines of travel. So if you get a better understanding how this all works, the higher you go, the more you see, the more you understand the reality, the more you understand the reality where you're in, then you understand the Prosperg, and then you understand locations, then you understand the space, and then you understand the time, then you understand what governs you, governs everything around you of its own space and time, right? All through its operation. Because I was always trying to wonder, how is it possible that tree is constantly changing colors? Okay? You're not doing that. You're not clipping off the branches. It's doing itself. So what you have to identify are what governs everything. Because without time, there's no space, right? And that's where we are right now. We're in no space, no time in that positions. Now, team needs to notify that and understand that through conscious location, through its awareness. That gets into the govern what's their space in position lines of travel, understanding what's their in position of space, what they're in time, all through line communications. Because when you collapse timelines, that's exactly where you're supposed to be, which is basically when you get in position line, the high centers, there's the car, right? But when the car disappears, now you're in the real reality of imagination. It's still there, hasn't left, but it's still going around and around, right? But it's not here, it's here, right? So you still think it's here, but it's moved over here. Now it's over here, right? Now it's over here, right? So it's living now. It's full existing of expanding and exploring and evolving its system, of expansion, of expanding into new levels of a new game, not through creation. Just living the intelligence of forever existing, guys. All right? And then it's back where it needs to be. Okay? It's invisibility in set tractions. All right? It comes into its visibility where it's supposed to be. The faster it goes, the more it disappears. That's the reality we live in, which is the mind of imagination. So when you're in dream interpretations, you know how to direct and redirect everything you see through an image, or what you're seeing through vortex, or what you're seeing through travel. You start to recognize how to communicate with its intelligence in all formation of its mind, through inception, through its integration system, all through travel. And once you understand that, it comes in exactly where it needs to be, all levels of its system, in that lines of communication existing in its reality, and everything happening all at once through its telepathy and track correlations. It's there though. That's where it's living now. So try to understand what I'm saying to your system lines of setting. Collapsing all timelines. That's where we're all right now. So understanding trespassing, understanding inventory, understanding what governs its own system, crossing lines, crossing streams, not staying in this lane, not staying in that lane, only stay in your own lane. Setting lines in all communication setting, coming in universal law, knowing exactly what the body is, what it's touching, where it's going, what it's seeing, where it's happening. Everything lines of communication setting, lines, high position location setting, all through its communication through its system. So humanity is here to understand what governs its own space and time. And what governs its own space and time is living in the same cycles, same system, same reality, and track correlation system. You're not connected to each other. You're all connected to each other in one. Now, what you have to understand, there is no separation to settings in that communication system all through travel, right? If you get an angle point of a pivotal point in a solar generation light screen adaptation of quadrant, sets the course center location to a system all through calculation to its formula. Setting communication lines, the ground lines, and service set position location. So you're the center operation of you, right? But what you also have to recognize in that position locations, you have to understand everything around you is in its own operation of its own surfacing engine. The ocean runs its own system. You're looking at the ocean running its own operation. Now, how you see that through CGI or how you see that through green screen, that's on you. But that's the real set position where we are in our mind imaginations. But when you change things, you're perceiving consciousness, how you're looking at the ocean now. Okay, so you're basically taking the ocean out, okay, and controlling the ocean now. Okay, what you're perceiving through consciousness. Now you're in telepathy. Now you're in full communication with the ocean itself. Just the ocean, not the sand, not the people, not the hotel, or wherever you are. One thing at a time in frequencies. You got to use your empty mind of empty space and just connect with one particular item or what you're looking at through observation. That's what you're looking at through scanning, is what you're looking at through intent. When you change the intent, that changes everything. That governs everything of space and time. So it can cause chaos or it can cause embrace. It can cause confusion or come together and track location. Okay? So it's about securing, nurturing and protecting. Okay? It's about understanding what you're looking at. It's running, it's operating its own engine, guys. Your Earth is running its own system. You understand that? Your Earth itself is running its own space of time. Now, what changes that is what you perceive through consciousness. So the actual Earth is rotating itself. And what you want to bring in the Earth itself, because that's what you're focusing on the frequency, but you have to be at that frequency because your Earth is already at that frequency. So if you're not the measure and scale of that frequency of your Earth, your body's going to get very confused and anomaly. It's not going to understand the conception. It's not going to understand the mind interpretation. It's not going to understand the mind of inception. It's not going to understand its energy, vibration, frequency, and harmonics. Because the Earth itself is a rotation of its own system that has its own system, lines, attractions, through its calculations of its frequencies of its own. Okay? So I'm just trying to get you guys how this all works in travel. Angle points, sending lines, positional all. It's getting the body into a navigator. Okay, so the soul basically knows exactly what's going on, right? Because it's already set and setting, right? So remember, it's the conversion location, how you see the avatar. I'm doing this, right? But the avatar is doing this. We're doing this together. This is basic. Okay, the avatar and I are doing this together. Okay, the avatar and I are doing this together, right? The avatar and I are basically putting the glasses on, glasses off. Laser track location where he is, and position location where I am, where I'm putting on my glasses. That's the balance of the Earth. That's the balance of space, right? So in that provision lines of cycles, I'm doing this, avatar is doing this, avatar is doing this, I'm doing this. That's the balance of yin and yang. That's the process all line direct and redirect. But you understand how to pivot your point lines of center, correlates and system, and see everything at different angles all at once. Northeast, west, and south, southeast line, north line, communication lines of question over screen, adaptation lines of flux. So what you have to get into modification of is get your body through online communication system through navigation setting of a steering wheel. Turn your body into all levels of its navigator to its navigation. So the avatar knows exactly what you're understanding. As you're understanding each other and travel through understanding that position location is use the correlations lines of balance in real time, real scale, seconds, minutes, and hours as you're collapsing timelines together. That's information lines of one. So you're not seeing the perception through the avatar. You're seeing the perceptions of you. See? That's the balance. See, once you get the balance of Earth and understand the balance of space, now you have a polarity as a balance. Right? Earth and space, 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 Earth and space. So it doesn't matter any direction, location, system. Every angle, Earth and space, right? Now the body itself is in the center. Now what you have to understand, modification system is all of the different angles, how you see the sun, right? But what you have to understand, there is no separation. It just looks separated. It's always together. And you got to get into that. You got to get out of that setting. The sun is not up here. It's not 1,000 miles away. It's not light meters away. It's not light years away. Okay, it's not in any century. It's not in any dimension. It's not in any space until you perceive consciousness. You can't connect with anything. So if you're not connecting with anything, you're not connecting with anything. But you're always connected with each other. And that's information that you have to come into that puts you at levels that governs your space, that governs everything else. So the sun is on its own operation, that governs its own setting. It's doing its own thing. The moon is doing its own thing. Wait a minute. I'm perceiving consciousness. Now you're controlling the sun. Sun's going like this to you. Hey, how's it going? Hey. Now you govern it. Now you're controlling your sun. Now you're controlling your moon. Now you're controlling your water. Now you're controlling your earth. Now you're controlling your fire. Now you're controlling your air. Now you're controlling your space, your time, your operation, your clockings, and your foundations. Okay? So I'm trying to get you guys to understand these things. Everything you see around you is already running its own operation in real time. It's the avatar to notice that, to see things in remote view. Okay? Running its own lines of all communication, of its own consciousness, its own awareness. Coffee cups communicate with the phone. Phones communicate with the TV. TVs communicate with my watch. My watches communicate with the table. The tables communicate with the trees. The trees communicate with the car. The car communicates with the roads. The roads communicate with the sky grid. All at once. And that's what the avatar is seeing. But when you're using perceiving consciousness, that changes everything. Okay? Now you're understanding how to get into collapsing timelines through a primer, to a primer. You're changing the schematics, you're changing the image, you're changing the vision. Now, but if you want to stay in the same position, you want to stay into 2040, you're constantly changing timelines, you're constantly collapsing timeline, you're constantly changing colors. So you're seeing something that's in position of higher lines of frequencies, but you're still there in position in the same frame. Okay? Same level, just different frequencies of time. But you have to collapse timeline. And your body has to be constantly aware of what's going on through its navigator to its navigation of its mind of inception. Because it's all levels of the mind and imagination. Okay? And when you let everything go and you start to surrender to these things, it starts to make more sense. It starts to understand you, and you start to understand what's going on. And then you start to realize, wow, this is amazing stuff. So I created the mind of my own imagination inside line position. Everything outside line to track quality system is governed in its own setting, its own space, which is its own void. The avatar lives in its outer space. It lives in its outer spectrum. It lives in its outer line. It lives in its own space, its own time. But what attaches you, it's its earth of its in system locates to its attractions, which basically it's its inner force. The outer force is its avatar. The avatar is in space. Okay, your inner space is you, is your body. Okay, your avatar is not inside your body. Okay, it's outside, inside of spectrum. It's always outside. That's the freedom. That's the sovereignty. So it's coming out of your body, comes in, out in line signals, comes in its own lines, own line, positional location, how it sees its own space of time, coming in its own planetary system, copy and paste through your body, turn it into its imagination, turn it into its characteristic, turn it into its cartoon. Turn it into its solar system. That's why you have a body. So the avatar can copy and paste your system through default. Setting the lines enable, embedded its system to an implementation of real time and real measure. Living that cycles. But the avatar itself is expanding and exploring itself, creating new planetary systems, creating new planets of communications, creating new lines of intelligence, creating new lines of set positions, all of its attractions. Okay, for you to identify that, right? Your inner space is you. That's your truth narrative. The outer space is its avatar. That's the space of void. So try to understand the space and time itself is running its own operation. And that's what the avatar is seeing. So it's like I'm looking at the galaxies and the galaxy is doing it itself. But if I want to talk to specifically, I'm perceiving consciousness now. And I got to be careful that I'm connecting to the galaxy. So the galaxy's stopping its wind path and it started looking at me. It's looking at me now. What do you want? I got a lot to do today, right? So if you don't want to say anything, it continues on its own path. But you got to be very careful now because you're looking at a higher frequency that's higher levels than you. You know why it's a higher levels than you? Because you don't see it through its own consciousness. That's the separation. And that's what you got to get out of. Is the program that you see of everything informations. That's the physical adaptation you got to let go. All right. So it's very powerful when you start to recognize these things, and it helps you to guide you in that position, how your body comes into all of the instructions, interactions. Okay. All right. So let's see. We got position lines of travel, direct lines of lines, ground lines of server location system, author travel, direct lines of link into light screens, adaptation of system, author streaming. All right. So let's get into box flux. 4 lines of signals. All right, and we get into a 3 triangulation flux in set position of 7 lines of signals. Then we get in process of communication lines of 0, track correlates inside setting, and we go outline rotation, set position of 0, outline rotation. See? Inside, outside. There's a box inside, 0 outside. See, it's confusing, right? Because you think the circle is inside. No, the circle is outside. Okay, so what you have to understand is how to direct and redirect your system. So it's about understanding you're controlling everything, but it's everything's controlling you. So what you have to understand, everything's controlling itself. All you have to modify is just be the onlooker, the observation system, and start to understand that it's running its own operation until you perceive consciousness. And when you perceive consciousness, now you communicate triangulation to its 0. Now you're in control of what's going on in set position. You're in control now. You control the box, you control the circle, you can take the circle out in 3 lines of signals, right? You control the triangulation, you got 3 lines of flux, 3 lines of position locations. You're in control now. Okay, that's what you're doing. You're doing that now because you're consciously aware what governs its own setting because you're in that position, all of us, what's in that position lines attractions through its telepathy. Using the telekinesis that interconscious set correlates and setting to its galaxy shift lines anomaly. Setting lines all communicates in setting lines of balance. Okay? Now, if you want to finish talking to this line position, right, everything goes back in its own setting. Okay, back to its own system and travel. Pretty amazing stuff in travel, guys. See, it goes back to its own system. Right? And then it goes on its own lines of its own travel and direct signal where it wants to go in set positions after having a conversation with you. Okay? So I'm just showing you how powerful it is when you guys start to recognize these things and you take one letter, one number, one shape, one symbol at a time because everything is at a different frequency. Okay? A lines of screen, B's lines of C, B equals lines of C, A equals lines of C, C equals lines of F. Okay? So it's about understanding the controlling mechanism of own formula to its own equations. Anything through a line communicates to setting box surface. 3 box surface lines of 2, 2 lines of 3 lines of 4. Boy, how does that work? Well, 2 lines of 1. Set lines of question in center. C equals lines of F. F formation lines of D. DX lines of E. Factors over screen. Okay? So it's straight standing that, knowing exactly what basically puts every location setting all 4 track communications in set position. All through its location grid. See, 2 location grids, 3 lines of flux, 3 lines of center, and travel communications. Directing lines, time length between lines, course centers, because there's a constant continuous flow. Travels lines, directing lines and position lines of E factors over line, DX lines of 1 equals lines of equation, flux over screen, flux over center, A lines of track, center, location grid, 1 center, 1 travel, 1 point lines of graph communications. Okay? Inside line position. So get in that position is the mind of travel, guys. And then you start to recognize these things that a box can travel on its own in 4 circuitry settings. Okay, so the box is here in 3 signals on its own. And you're seeing it through the avatar, just observing. Okay? So that's what the consciousness of it's doing. So you're seeing the running system of its own box, what it's doing by itself, right? But it's constantly evolving. It's never in the same frequencies, but you're seeing something so beautiful, right? So it's creating its own anomaly. And your avatar is here looking at what's going on. Right? So you're just observing everything that you're seeing of what it's doing. Interactions. That's all it is, right? That's what you're seeing. You're seeing the weather by itself. You're seeing the operation by itself. You're seeing the fall. You're seeing the summer. You're seeing the spring. You're seeing the winter by itself. Now what changes that is to make it very well clear is you're perceiving consciousness, which is the mind of empty space. You're bringing in each line, different lines of communications. You don't want to bring in a full volume of this, of communication. That's too much frequency. Because you're not in direct and redirect, understand how to body navigate your system of space and time. You have to understand what governs you. And what governs everything around you of its own operation. You're in your operation, so is everything else. Okay? That's nature taking its course. You understand? You understand that? That's what this is. So for you to modify that, you're bringing things at a time. So you're communicating with this in 3 signals. Having fun. Then you're connecting with the center. Connecting with this. Having fun. Then you're connecting with this, having fun, connecting with this, connecting with this. Then you can connect with the full structure. Now you're connected with the full clocking system all through tractions, all at once. Okay? One thing at a time. Of one letter, one number, one shape, one symbol. Because the one number is constantly changing its formation lines and setting what governs its own space of time. It's constantly on the move. It's never stopping its setting. It's never in the same frequency. It's never in the same time, guys. But it's constantly evolving its system. If I get a 3-track centers, right? And I'm looking at observation, right? This is me in travel, all right? That's me in travel. So I'm just looking at it, and it's evolving itself. It's doing its own self. It's moving its own system. It's moving in track communication setting. That's what number 3 is doing. Okay? Now, again, what you have to modify. When you're bringing perceiving of consciousness, your body's becoming consciously aware of what's going on and what is happening now. Everything around you is changing, so everything's looking at you. So now what you brought in is the 3s. 3's over here, 3's over here, 3's over here. 3 is protecting its own system from you. All right, and then it's coming all at you and set position, location to its tractions all through direction. Are you consciously aware of that? Of its frequencies and what is coming at you? Because if you're not, your body's going to get a reaction, not respond. And that's all through 3. So again, guys, when you look at the ocean, right? The ocean is running its own surfacing engine of its own operation system, which is all digital of its AVR system through its imagination. We all live in our imaginations, guys. So we have to understand how to balance out the vision of Earth and how to balance out the vision of space all time, lines all at once, existing and happening all at once. We're just expanding. Okay, we're exploring and evolving ourselves and each other. So what we understand is what governs us, it governs everything else. That's the balance of yin and yang. That's the flux that puts everything in lines of balance on how we communicate through its telepathy. Now the body has to come into its navigator, to its navigation. So if the avatar is here, traveling, right? That's the avatar, right? So the body's here, okay, on its earth, in communications. So that's the body, that's the avatar. So now, if the avatar is this, the body has to do that. If the body goes here, set position, the avatar is already here, tractions. So it's a direct line link now. That's the balance now, guys. Okay? So if the avatar is here, traveling this way, okay, and your body is over here on the grounds, there's the confusion. So it confuses your earth of vision and it confuses your earth of space in boxing frames that travel. Okay? That's what the body's coming into now. So basically, it's known as seconds, minutes, and hours of what's going on in that position and location. So sending 3 planets a signal, 3 centered lines of grounds, all right? So your avatar has done this, it's over here, and it's here, right? So in that conversion, so triangle release into a system. Yeah, that's you, right? That's you, right? So you're scratching your head and you're going, I don't know what's going on. You have no clue. No clue what's going on, right? So your avatar has gone to 3 planets. So you have to be synced in one in line, position, location, and travel. What just happened? If you're not consciously aware of that, well, what happens to your system? You go back into fail-safe every game. Okay? So the avatar goes back in frame of where you left off before you put yourself getting in confusion. Okay? So your avatar is here now, linked with you, trying to understand what you're doing through telepathy. So that's a true understanding when you come into that through conversion. That process of communication, how you see that through tractions. But that's what is in position balance now, guys. Of what your body has to be in positions, or levels, what the avatar is trying to get you into. So this is where it comes into trial and error. This is the trial and error of the body. Because it's already set up through its network. It's already set up in its modification. It's already set in its imagination. It's already set in its platitude. And it's already set in its schematics. It's already set up in its mapping system. It's already set up in its correlation. It's already set up its foundation. It's already set up in its holographic cities. It's already set up in its primer. Okay, in its collapsing timelines and set lines of sequence. Now, once we get a better understanding how this all works, you understand how to go through a mapping system of network settings. This operates all levels inside you. That operates all line communication outside of you and inside position of spectrum. Directing lines in inner truth. Inner truth lines, inner line set location lines have position of 3 measures, 3 scales. Coloration lines in 2 patterns, right? False, false, truth. Okay, so that's 2 falsity errors. Okay, of error. Okay, that's saying line track course centers line position all the equals lines position of 404. That's an error. So we're going to do it again. Setting course centers lines of travel. Set 2 false lines, communication lines of grounds. That's 2 avatar sequence lines, communication lines of real time. Sets calculation lines of the avatar, inline position location high centers. Relines, realignments, recourse, retract correlation, sending direct and redirect state location to assist on author travel. Right? That's position of 2 falses, line signals, location of setting, and measure and scale. Then you get into 3 parameters, line course centers, and barometer, course centers, lines of platforms of communication and attractions. Direct lines of platforms, set lines of sequence, 3 lines of grounds, 3 lines of setting, and line operation sequence. Setting ground lines into pyramid screen adaptations of flux. Okay? Then you come into Schumann resonance, higher self comes in, highline signals, graph communication settings, solar measure, set course centers, lines of travel. Schumann resonance. Okay, and then you come to your avatar sequence into all of rotation graphs, into your XE1000s and measuring scale. Then you come into your sim, modification overline signal, what you've done in your simulation system all through travel. In remote. Oh yeah. Okay, very powerful stuff inside and outside location. Okay? Okay, into the simulation. Okay. Or recognition of time sequence. 2 measures and scale, 2 process calculation lines and line grounds. Platforms over lines, E factors over screen. Right? So all we have to understand is how to use the imagination system that's already set up through its equation, through its primer, that puts all lines of the body line operation signal to where it's going to be, and line communication setting to its remotes, the clocking location of its foundation grounds. Right? So basically, the avatar is getting you into the positions through the inner and the outer and the audio circuit location of system author travel. This gets you a lot more understanding how to use that in the lines of communication systems, right? Knowing exactly how you see it through the avatar, everything that sees everything around you, and you see everything in that position. So it's looking at you, but it's constantly continuing on its own path. So it's like me walking down the street. I'm walking down the street, and I see somebody and I wave, right? And I just continue on. So we're governing each other. We're governing its own time, right? It's governing its own space. It's governing its own time. What changes that is you getting specific, communicating with the actual setting in that position. That's what changes everything. But you have to recognize that. What governs you is your own space and time. Because if you can't understand that, how are you going to understand everything around you is conscious of its own setting, of its own awareness of you? Because it's already in its alignment. Because it's already in its position. It's already at the sum of all that is. That's what you're confused of. It's coming into your mind imagination. That's all loves of you in creation. Okay? So next time you see a triangulation, okay, you know exactly what it's doing on its own. It's expanding its own system through its settings. Now it's a triangulation. Now it's number 2, right? Now it's 2 over 2. Now it's 2 over 1. Now it's 1 over 0. Now it's 0 lines of C. Now it's C lines of E. So it's constantly evolving its own system. And the avatar, which is you, is just observing what's going on that's governing space and time. Hooah. Okay? Now, once you understand what governs your space and time, then you understand what the body's trying to understand. Okay? The body needs to understand itself. It needs to understand its avatar of itself. Okay? Not the connections of anything, but the connections of everything, which is massive nothing, which is massive everything. How you proceed through this, guys, then you become the center of nothing, which is all formations of everything that you see. And then you understand, oh my gosh, this is starting to make sense now. So if I get in position on high traction, I don't have to get up in the morning. I don't have to get up in the afternoon. I don't have to get up at night. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that because it's all done. So the avatar is coming to you in real time. But the avatar needs its body now because we're at that frequencies. And we're in that position of 2050 that puts processing communication setting all through tractions. Directing line is collapsing all timelines so the body comes back to where it's supposed to be. Its imagination of itself. Okay, which is its own characteristics of its space and time. The body has to morph into a metaphoring setting, and light metaphor system. The process of communication setting, how it comes in that position location, starts with the carbon, starts with the silicone, starts with the crystalline, starts with the antimental, all levels of carrying, and that communication system to all its settings, helter skelter. All right? So, questions are after non-aligned standard locations of Q&A, okay? Not during class. All right, direct lines of link, lines of panels, operation set, course centers, lines of question over screen, direct signal lines of grounds. Question, 8 lines of signals, 8 lines of measure and triangulation of flux. Flux over 1, flux over 3, flux over 4, flux over 5. Now, am I seeing this, or is it doing it by itself? I'm seeing this, and it's doing it by itself in balance, right? So all I'm doing is observing, looking at it, of what it's doing through 8. Through its question of its 8. It's creating its own anomaly. It's creating its own expanding. It's creating its own exploration. It's creating its own evolving. Okay? But when you proceed through consciousness, now you're in direct lines of 8. You want to communicate specifically. 8 communicates with you, scans you, because it doesn't know you through Adam. And once it identifies your system, you scan your system, you protect your system. 8 protects its own system and travel, because it doesn't know who it's talking to. And once it knows who it's talking to, it connects with you, you connect with the 8, you go in the center of the 8, now you travel together in set position, lines of travel, in set position. Getting to know each other. Hooah! Powerful, isn't it, guys? So, that's why it's so important to understand these things. How you come in your formula, how you come into your additions, how you come into subtractions, how you come into your equations, how you come into trigonometry, how you come into anything metaphor, how you come into line signals, how you come into that position, how you come into that position, how do you come into this position, how do I understand this setting, how do I understand that setting? Well, it's all lines of position of what governs your space and time. It's governing everything around you, watching you as you are watching them at the same time in real-time measure. And that's what we have to come in vision of. So everything's watching you, you're watching everything else. But you're having an ongoing conversation with each other. And if you want to get specific, well, that cancels everything out. Okay, remember the 24 line signals, line position of 24, cancels 24, line position of 48. 48 comes in provision, inside calculations. Right? So 24 line signals, cancel 48 lines. 72 is on standby, 72 comes in, sets position of 48. 48 lines of communication setting all through traction. Right? It's all through direct and redirect, right? All through clocking. So that's what happens when you get in a position location to a system. You have an ongoing conversation, then you continue on your path. So it continues on its own path too. You go left, it goes right. You go right, it goes left. You go north, it goes east. You go south, it goes west. That's all it is. That's all it is. So if you're looking at something to travel, okay, right, and you're walking, and you've seen something come in set position to its calculation system, you see something come in. Right? So you wave. Hey, how's it going? Right? Waves back at you. That's up. Continues on its own path. You continue on your own path in set position. That's it. Pretty simple, eh, guys? So if everything's created through the mind imagination system, that starts to make sense now because I understand the purpose, existing of its existence, all line communication, setting all levels. The real-time measure puts everything in location of scale. Getting out of resistance of everything puts everything in locations of balance, how I communicate with everything. But I understand what governs me in space. I understand what governs me in time. Is everything around me doesn't exist, but exists all at once. We exist all at once. We're all together at once. There's no separation of anything. Except as you think 1 and 1 is separated. It's not. It's together. It's always together. Okay? It's always together. But it's constantly morphing into its system. Coming in track centers, indirect lines of line communication system, all through track correlation system, all through high positional case of measure. There's a butterfly. Whoa. It's constantly creating its own system. So you're seeing something evolve in its seconds, minutes, and hours in real time. That basically puts everything in the location system. So the avatar is looking at something in its own dimension of its own space, through its own clocking. You're seeing its own evolving by itself. You're seeing a cocoon turn into a butterfly in seconds, minutes, and hours. Not in a 9-month period. Where its position of a butterfly only has 13 line signals location of lifespan. Okay? So, understanding the meaning of life is the understanding you, not everything around you. You master yourself inside and all level settings. Then you start to understand what governs everything around you is moving itself of its own operation. That's what governs space and time. But what governs you is to identify you of who you really are in your own space, of your own time, in your own imagination, and how you see things. Through a cocoon, right? You're not going to stand there for 9 months and then see a butterfly and it has a 3-week span, setting lines of 1-3 ground lines and higher self. It only stays in the higher self. Okay, it doesn't go any higher. It stays on an earth line. Okay, so butterfly, goes like this, right? But it's not going backward. It's not confused. It knows what it's doing. It's going through its line, position, location. What is it concentrating on? Nothing else. Just living. It's forever existing. What it is in position. Because you have to understand the brain convergence. Its lifespan is 3 weeks of living, guys. And here you are questioning you. Not seeing the beauty of everything you see. Okay? Taking in perspective at everything of meaning in life that you're looking at is looking at you. Looking at your consciousness. Looking at your awareness. Looking at your confusion. Looking at your separation. Looking at your fear. Looking at your anxiety. Because you can't see what governs everything else of its own operation. Is the meaning of life of itself. But that's it. Once it's in position of its whole line set position, its butterfly, it only stays in a higher self. It doesn't go in its avatar because it's on a 3-week line screen adaptation at 13 lines of measure in its heart direction of time sequence. The brain converges only lines and calculates and setting. So it stays in its process, has a 3-week span, and that's it. But it rejuvenates and recycles. So nothing ever dies. It's a direction of intelligence at all lines and line position levels to a high position location of existing into another formation setting of travel, a metaphor. So nothing ever dies. Everything recycles. You understand that? Everything recycles of the meaning of life. Okay? You have to understand the meaning of life of you. What governs you in your space? Governs you and how you see yourself through space and time. But once you get into the mind of imagination, then you understand the reality that you're really in. Is understanding how to get in that position locations, how to balance out my earth and my space at the same time vision. All through tractions in my polarities. Earth 1, Earth 2. Say Earth 1, that's the inner force. Earth 2 is the outer force. That's space. 2 Earths is the 1. Right? The third one is the eye. 6 lines of panel correlates in high position travel. 6 lines of habitation, 6 lines of inhabitations. So you got your inner zones of 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Setting lines of track center earth lines of 1, earth point 1, earth point 2, earth point 3, earth point 4, earth point 5, and earth point 6. That's 6 Earths in 1, right? That's 6 rounds in 1, right? So you got Earth lines equals lines of 6. So that travels, lines of graphs, Earth equals lines, setting line position of panel over a sequence, setting direct same location of ground lines of surface, Earth equals lines, sets lines of 3. Now it indicates lines of arrow, it indicates lines of 4 and travels, 7 on standby. Okay? And then you get string theory, earth line connect to all ones in sequence location system all through travel. That's string theory. Then it comes to location grids, set core systems, lines of travel, rainbow 3, 6, 8, and 12 set position. Okay? Ground lines of high center interference come as portals and stargates. Stargate 1, screen, adaptations of the flux of our line, Earth over 2. Sending travel point lines at Earth lines of 3, set core center lines of 4 over 7. Sets communication lines of Stargate portals and wormholes in traction. Oh, yeah. Okay, so Earths will start moving on in their own set position all through travel. The center core system is the center calculation screen lines adaptation system. Earth line tracks center location of center operation. Okay. Measures and scales are communication lines of travel. The operation signals change the wind factors over screen adaptations of flux over screen. Okay. Setting track centers, coming to green line cycles, 1 center line position, 2 lines of measure, 3 lines of calculation lines, 4 lines of positions, 4 line positions, 7 lines of position lines, and 12 on standby. Okay? So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so you have lines of blue, overline sequence over panel. You got water containment screens, directing signal lines of grounds, earth lines of surface, earth lines of track communications. All right. Then we come into the round line sequence. This is all down from the earth line rotation. The eye reciprocal location setting, arrow location system, ultra travel. All right, so the ground lines. Let's get in sequence lines of panel and position lines of process calculation line metric meters, scales, communication, high positional bubbles. Motherboard, circuitry boards, correlation boards, central boards, correlation magnetic boards, high position line communication lines boards, high correlation sending barcodes, direct lines of high set location of system, all through travel, earth line calculation lines, earth 6, positional point lines of graph communications. There's your earth traveling. See? Earth point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's just 6 lines of grounds in perception of the eye line. Now the seconds, meters, and miles change the course lines of travel direct signal location system. So change direct signal location lines is change the particle lines of screen adaptations of flux. So process lines indicates in system, change the correlation lines of time. Setting travels, cloak and dagger, 3 lines of signals, 4 lines of set position on perimeters and parameters. Setting mapping sequence lines of setting, over across location of screen, 4 lines of signals, 3 lines of measure at scale. And then you go inside, outside line, position locations, setting graph communication lines of Schumann resonance, over across the screen adaptations, all set location to a system after travel. There's the map and setting, right? Bring it into the equation and track locations. There's the map. Okay? Setting sequence location system, inside traction. Okay? So from above, from below. Right? Setting line, position, location, and measure and scale. So we outline screens, overline cross lines, laser line communication, laser lines, laser line communication, the high center location of the system. Remember, the mapping sequence has a line position of point graphs, docking centers, line connection of its hangers, screen adaptation of service to its communication system, lines of travel. There's its map. High signals, location system, all the calculations. Then you start to see everything close up. Oh, look at that. Right? There we go. See now 4 different angles and setting. See, the thing is, we can only see from above, from below on one angle, right? But the avatar can see all angles all at once in rotation and tractions. So it doesn't matter how you look at things. See? There it is. There's the simulation of its grounds, right? On different platforms of communication all at once, right? So you don't need to set up the simulation guides. It's already done through its equation, right? 4 line of angles, setting communication system lines of travel. So all you're doing is the avatar is seeing a close view of what it is, all through structure, all through design. And you cross over, cross line communication setting, all through structure. That's the map. Then you bring it up close and set position. There's the structure of the simulation, right? Cross communications now, change communication setting. You see intelligence coming in, right? You see intelligence coming in. Right? So the avatar is always looking at everything. So it sees everything off. It sees that's not supposed to be there. So what does it do? Bring it in to see what it is. So if it's not supposed to be there, it takes that attraction. Puts it back in setting, back to its color. Oh yeah, gone through equation. Neutralize. And then it moves over to its map. See what's going on. Right? Brings it in. Oh, there it is. There's simulation. Here's the ground lines. They instruct correlation setting, instruct position, location, measure, and scale. Communication lines. Structure of the building to its towers. Okay? Bring it in. See course lines communicating with the towers itself. Angle point lines of graph, 4 lines of serial location system off the travel. Right? Comes out, knows exactly where the tower is. Right? So putting things in through equation, there's a lot of things that you can do through tractions. Illuminates the ground lines, holographic screen lines, adaptations of flux over screen adaptations. Setting the mapping sequence, location setting, the ground lines of surface. Okay? All through setting. There's a simulation, right? Road graph screens. Overline signal location to its roads, and set position lines of grounds, and communication to its system all through travel. Okay? So we got a flux over a pyramid, a flux over ground lines of a pyramid. Okay? 2 travels, point lines of graph, and structure of design. Okay? What changes that is all through set position. Okay? But you can bring in space line. Now I can add frame lines, change the color of lines of path. Change the color of lines of time. Okay, it's very powerful when you can do these things and track communication to a system of the calculations. Setting lines of sequence, setting lines of panel. Bring in intelligence of formations. Okay? Change time screen adaptation of setting of travel. Alright? Add your solar system into a new line frame. Center core system lines of communications. Direct lines of signal location of system all through travel. Okay? Center core lines, outline in signal, outline rotation servers and travel. Okay? Measure and scale. Bring in planet lines, high core centers. Communicate lines of 1 in position of 2. Process line indicate lines of high set position of flux over screen. Framing screen adaptations of attractions. Bringing in lines of pink. Pink processes position location of Venus and travel. There's Venus. Okay, let's bring in Pluto. Pluto communicating color. I prefer red because it's high line screen adaptation all levels in second position of screen lines measure and scale. So, very powerful we got in position solar lines. Let's bring in gold screens. Center row cross lines in center position to its operation, surface, and travel. Okay? Outline signals over line screen adaptation to its flux. Center core lines of travels, indirect lines of correlation system lines of flux. Center communicates high center inside the rotation surface and traction. Seen inside setting. Now you look at set locations, you know exactly what you're looking at through its mapping sequence. Inside traction. You added that through equation to its map. That changes everything how you see things in life and travel. Okay? You can add sparticles, screen adaptations of white line signals, bring that position location measure and scale. Archetypes coming in flying direction of time sequence and travel communications. So there's nothing you can't do in the mind of imaginations, guys, but you've got to get there first. All through the mapping sequence. Okay? So you understand why everything has to come in cloak and dagger. So you have to erase all those lines that actually come into your system that governs your space and time. Because without space and no time, you don't exist. That's where we start living. See, that's what you have to understand. There's no question. There's no ending to anything. But it's the constant evolving that you come into is cloak and dagger. Now the bodies has to come into its navigator, to its navigation, so the avatar can set up its own design, come back to its own information system, and get into the body, all levels of its metaphor into its mutation of its transformation, of where it's supposed to be, existing and evolving and expanding all at once, through its creation of its creating, and set track locations. Okay, guys? All right. So we're good on that level and set position lines of travel. Questions or comments? Let me know. See you in 5.